Hey guys, Pedro here to tell you about the latest from Turmion Kätilöt, Reset, on October 25th on Nuclear Blast. The album has 12 tracks, 46 minutes in length, and this is the band's 11th full-length studio album. They are a Finnish industrial metal band. When I look at this album, I look at a set list. When you're putting together a set list, you try to create an overall experience. You want the fans to be engaged, you want the fans to be entertained, you want the experience to be energetic, starting off with a bang, finishing off with a bang, and then in between creating ebbs and flows in order to make things interesting, engaging, and keeping the listener focused and connected with what's happening in front of them. This album is exactly the same, and I think this is the best way to approach a record like this. You look at the songs that you have, you look at these 12 tracks, and you look at their own individual characteristics, and then you think, where would I place them if I was creating a set list with these 12 songs? How would I want that concert experience vibe to be? Because that's what I want my record to feel and sound like. And I feel like they achieved that, because this album definitely comes across with that perspective, with that mindset, right in front of you from the moment you press play. So it's an album that you may say that it's straightforward because it doesn't overcomplicate anything, but I feel like it's an album that goes back to the well, to some that they know extremely well, which is how to put together a live show and then bring that experience into the way you build the track listing on a record. Once you get into the sound, I don't feel like this album is necessarily a reinvention of who they are. If I look at the title of the album and I see the word reset, where do I find that reset? Well, I find that reset on this record in a sonic standpoint, because I feel like the album, while not necessarily disconnecting from the last two records, it does reset a little bit, and it pushes the pendulum a little bit further back into their discography, but not necessarily cutting ties with what the previous records were all about. It's more about bringing something that they have done in the past, merging that with some of the greatest things that they've done more recently, and then allowing that to have a new experience coming into the future. That is the sound of this record, and that is how I see the reset in the title matching what I'm hearing in the sound. So don't expect necessarily something completely new, something completely out of the box on every single song, rather a reset and a reconfiguration of what the evolution of their sound has been over the last decade. I think that's pretty much where this album lands sonically. Now, you're going to find certain elements on this record that might surprise you, that might have a little bit more emphasis. One of them, for example, the guitars. I felt like the guitar sound on this album was more predominant. It had a little bit more bite, it had a little bit more heaviness, it had a little bit more impact. In the mix, they allowed the guitars to have a little bit more room to breathe. Something that had not been lost, but had been hidden a little bit more over the previous records. So it's bringing a little bit more metal, is resetting on the metal sound behind the band and bringing that sound into this record. The drums, for example, the drums feel also like they have more impact. They feel like they're more empowered in the sound on this album. And I think the reason why they feel that way is not just because of how they sound and how they are in the mix, is the impact that the guitar sound has on how the drums are presented. The two are intertwined. I don't think you can look at one without looking at the other. The two have this correlation between them that impacts them differently, but creates an impact, and it puts them a little bit more at the surface. And then obviously you have the synths, you have the keyboards, the orchestrations. All of that has always been part of Turmion Kätilöt, and perhaps that's the one element on this album where you don't see that much of a reset. Outside of an element here and there, a little bit more of a symphonic piece here and there, some really interesting piano work here and there. Outside of some nuances that some tracks have, the overall consistency and the impact of this one element stays perhaps more consistent with what I've seen from the band, and perhaps it's the one element where the reset wasn't pushed all the way down. Now, when it comes to the vocals, the vocal dynamic on this record was, I don't think there was a reset there, but it's definitely a different readjustment think readjustment is perhaps a better word to describe the vocal performance on this album. I enjoyed it tremendously. I thought the one element that they readjusted in a really intelligent way is the backing vocals. The backing vocals, the layers, the textures of on the vocal performances bring that same live experience that I mentioned in the way the album is designed. On the vocal performance, that live experience also is coming in and having an impact on how this album comes across. Definitely making the record brighter, definitely making the record bigger, definitely making the record a lot more fun. This is definitely not a dark album, not as dark as some of its predecessors. This is overall an album that has a more emphasis on drums, guitars, without losing the DNA of the band that comes from the orchestrations and the synths. That industrial side is still there, but it's a heavier industrial sound than what I've seen from them. Considering the cooperation of those two drums and guitars and what they offer, I'm not surprised that that's where this album shifts sound-wise. But then overall, it's a more fun record. The heaviness of the album, the push of the record, doesn't change anything as far as how bright, how much fun, how energetic this album is. It's an album that pushes you forward. It doesn't bring you down. And I felt like with specifically the last two albums, they were a little bit darker. They were created in dark times, but they were a little bit darker than this one. This one is trying to reset that fun, that energetic, that almost clown-like approach to how you make music and how you present it to your fans in a very light-hearted way. So this album has a lot of that, but it also has a lot of heaviness with it. So it's a very interesting sounding album, one that in my opinion has great qualities, and it was needed. I feel like this album was what the band needed at this point in time. I think it's an important record from that standpoint. It's a record that brings in elements from other eras of Turmion Kätilöt and presents them with a very brand new face on it. As far as favorite songs are concerned, let me start off with Päästä Irti. Super industrial, heavy opening. I mean, really heavy industrial sound, both musically and vocally. Like, the vocals are very electronic. So it's a very interesting way of starting the song. And then once you get over that, it moves into a more open, light-sounded experience. Super textured as far as the vocals are concerned, especially once you get into the chorus. I find that the chorus on this track was so much fun, so dynamic, so bouncy. It was really the life of the party, if you will. The verses felt heavier, thicker. The guitars added a lot of heaviness, a lot of thickness to those verses, making them feel a little bit more narrow, a little bit more compact. But once you get into the chorus, the song opens up, and it's just a fun track to listen to. Very bouncy, very light-hearted once you get into that experience of how the vocals come across and how the sound comes across. Definitely a song that funnels its way into that chorus. Next we have Musta Piste. The keys, the keyboards on this song, the melody on the keyboards on this song are extremely important for this track to work. They start off right in the forefront so that you notice that melody, and that melody registers in your brain, and then it's really important because it comes back again. It comes back again more in the choruses. It does peak ever so slightly in the verses, but it comes back more in the chorus with a bigger impact, more defined, and it brings a very distinct atmosphere to the song. It brings a very distinct experience to the track, a track that, because of that melody, because of the way it sounds in that chorus, it feels very haunting. It has a little bit of a melancholic aspect to it. The verses, when that melody drops, become different. They sound completely different. They feel slightly more open, slightly more brighter. I'm not gonna say dark because it's not a dark song, but definitely not as melancholic. So it's a track that feels very diverse, that feels very eclectic, that showcases different sides of the band's sound and the experience that comes with it, but connected in a very seamless way that makes the overall ebbs and flows of the songs to be very welcoming. Last but definitely not least, Otava. Super heavy start, and by the way this song starts off, not only is it heavy, it has this great orchestral piece to it. The vocals are also heavy. They have this heaviness to it, this harshness to it. If I didn't know better, and I press play on this song and I just catch a glance of it, that first opening piece, it sounds like a Dimmu Borgir track. It has that symphonic death metal feel to it because of the heaviness, because of the vocal delivery, the orchestrations, everything. It just really sounded like a Dimmu Borgir track. And I don't think I've ever heard a Turmion Kätilöt with that kind of experience, that almost cinematic horror movie vibe to it. So it's a great song from that standpoint because it offered me something completely unique and completely different from the rest of the record. It's a track that has a killer riff. The guitars sound killer. The chugginess on the guitars is killer. The backing vocals help lighten up the song because this overall, when you look at the track overall, it is a heavy song vocally, musically. The guitars play an impact, the drums as well. So it's a heavy song overall. But the backing vocals on this track lighten up the mood. They give the song pockets, making the track for the fan of the band, but not necessarily a fan of this specific style of sound, to make the track a little bit easier to digest, a little bit more easier to process. The orchestrational piece that the song have is phenomenal, and I love the overall heaviness. I love that Dimmu Borgir vibe, but with a Turmion Kätilöt lime twist. This is it, their latest record, Reset, on October 25th on Nuclear Blast. Let me know your thoughts on the band, on the singles. Hit me up in the comment section. I'll see you all at the next video. Take care, guys.